guys, this is your girl Wakeji Kamore and welcome to Reflections by Wakeji Kamore. I am back. A big thank you to each and every one of you for your patience as I took my birthday break. Just rested. Thank you so much for the birthday wishes and for the blessings. I received them. I agree with heaven, and I'm truly grateful for the love that you guys have shown me, for your kindness, for your patience. Asanteni sana. Now, back to the reason why we are here. We are currently studying the book of 2 Samuel, which we are covering chapter by chapter. We have gone through chapters 1 to 16, and today I'll be reading chapter 17, and afterward I will share my main takeout. So please stay with me till the end, and don't forget to invite a friend by sharing this link. Alright, just a quick recap, just in case mumesahau kule tulikuwa. At this point, David had already been overthrown by his son Absalom. And this led to him fleeing to live in the mountains. David had, however, planted a spy as Absalom's advisor. The priests were also for David, and the priest's son were also on David's son. So once again, it seems like David is on the run for his life, and let us see what happens in chapter 17. All right, I'm going to be reading that from the New Living Translation, so kindly follow through. It says, now Ahithophel urged Absalom. Let me first remind you guys who Ahithophel is. Ahithophel is a guy who was David's counselor or David's advisor, but when Absalom anointed himself to be king, Ahithophel decided he's not going to run away with David. He's going to remain behind and be Absalom's advisor. And when David heard that story, that Ahithophel decide anataka kubaki na Absalom, he actually made a prayer and he said, may he give the king, or rather Absalom, bad advice. That actually was a prayer that David made. All right, let's see. So this guy, Ahithophel, is urging Absalom and saying, let me choose 12,000 men to start out after David tonight. Please remember, they're still looking for David. They still want to kill David so that Absalom can remain king forever and forever. He says, I will catch up with him when he is weary and discouraged. He and his troops will panic and everyone will run away. Then I will kill only the king, and I will bring all the people back to you as a bride returns to her husband. After all, it is only one man's life that you seek. Then you will be at peace with all the people. And this plan seemed good to Absalom and to all the elders of Israel. But then Absalom said, bring in Hushai, the Archite. Let's see what he thinks about this. Who is Hushai? Hushai is a spy that David has planted in Absalom's palace, or rather kingdom or throne or whatever you want to call it, in this reign, very short reign. So David aliambia Hushai, wewe enda and be in Absalom's council. Go and tell him that you will serve him and that you will be his advisor as well. So yes, so Absalom says, bring in Hushai there. Let's see what he thinks about this. When Hushai arrived, Absalom told him what Ahithophel had said. Then he asked, what is your opinion? Should we follow Ahithophel's advice? If not, what do you suggest? Well, Hushai replied to Absalom. Please note, Hushai had been planted in this palace so that he can frustrate Ahithophel's ideas and suggestions and plans. That was his sole reason, to just frustrate them. And to also make sure that whatever plan that is being planned in that palace, that he would tell the priest, and then the priest would tell his sons, and then those sons would go to David and tell David, this is what Absalom is planning to do. All right, are we together up until a point? I hope so. All right, so he said, this time Ahithophel has made a mistake. You know your father and his men, they are mighty warriors. Right now, they are as enraged as a mother bear who has been robbed of her cubs. And remember that your father is an experienced man of war. He won't be spending the night among the troops. He has probably already hidden in some pit or cave. And when he comes out and attacks and a few of your men fall, they will panic among your troops, and the word will spread that Absalom's men are being slaughtered. Then even the bravest soldiers, though they have the heart of lion, will be paralyzed with fear. For all Israel knows what a mighty warrior your father is and how courageous his men are. I recommend that you mobilize the entire army of Israel. Let's pause right there. So Hushai has come and said, oh no, hii idea ya Ahithophel, si poa. Let's not do that. Because remember how mighty David is and how great of warriors his men are. You can't defeat him like that. So he's now recommending to Absalom that he recruits the whole army of Israel, like all the tribes of Israel. First, this will take time. So that's what he's trying to do. Hushai is trying to buy time for David so that this information can get to David quick and David can prepare. This is exactly what he's doing. So I recommend that you mobilize the entire army of Israel, bringing them from as far as Dan in the north and Beersheba in the south. That way you will have an army as numerous as the sand of the seashore. And I advise that you personally lead the troop. When you find David, will fall on him like dew that falls on the ground. Neither he or his men will be left alive. And if David were to escape in some town, you will have all Israel that there at your command. Then we can take ropes and drag the walls of the town into the nearest valley until every stone is turned down. Then Absalom and all the men of Israel said, Hushai's advice is better than Ahithophel's. For the Lord has determined to defeat the counsel of Ahithophel, which was really the better plan, that he could bring disaster on Absalom. All right, let's pause there. So it says that actually Ahithophel's advice, which was to just gather 12,000 men and go and defeat David, was actually a great plan. But Hushai, the idea that he had come with is now that Absalom needs to gather the whole of Israel. He needs to actually lead this army. So he wants Absalom to go into army, to go into the battle, which probably he will get killed at, but also because he wants to buy David time. But I like the fact that the Bible actually records that Ahithophel's idea was a better idea than Hushai's idea. But God was determined to defeat the counsel of Ahithophel. Why was God determined to defeat this counsel? First, because David is his anointed king. And of course, God is at his corner. And then also David had made this prayer that Ahithophel's advice, or rather Ahithophel would give bad advice, or rather that his counsel would be defeated in one way or the other. All right, so Hushai took Zadok and Abithiah, the priests. What Ahithophel had said to... All right, let me repeat that. It says, Hushai told Zadok and Abithiah. Abiathar and Zadok were priests. And then these two priests had sons. So every time something would be discussed in the palace, Hushai would tell the priests. And then the priests would tell their sons. And then their sons would give that information to David. So this is exactly what's happening. Hushai ameenda kwa Zadok na Abithiah amewambia what Ahithophel had said to Absalom. He has also said what his plan is, and verse 16 says, quick, he told them, find David and urge him to not stay in the shallow of Jordan River tonight. He must go across at once into the wilderness beyond, otherwise he will die and his entire army with him. Jonathan and Ahimaaz have been staying at the end rock so that nobody would see them entering and leaving the city. All right, who is Jonathan and Ahimaaz? Jonathan and Ahimaaz are the sons of these two priests, Zadok and Abiathar. All right. So they used to sit at the gate so that people wouldn't see them entering and leaving the city. Arrangement had been made for a servant girl to bring them the message they were to take to King David. But a boy spotted them at Enrog, and he told Absalom about it. So they quickly escaped to Bahurim. Gosh, is Magina. When a man hid them down inside a well in his courtyard. The man's wife put a cloth over the top of the well and scattered grain on it to dry in the sun, so no one could suspect they were there. When Absalom's men arrived, they asked, have you seen Ahimaaz and Jonathan? The women replied, they were here, The woman replied, "They were here, but they crossed over the brook. Absalom's men looked for them without success and returned to Jerusalem. Then the two men crawled out of the well and hurried to King David. He said, 'Quick,' they told him, 'cross the Jordan tonight.' They told him how Ahithophel had advised that he be captured and killed. So David and all the people with him went across the Jordan River during the night, and they were all on the other bank before them. When Ahithophel realized that his advice had not been taken and followed, he saddled his donkey and went to his hometown. He set his affairs in order and hanged himself." Oh, yeah, the guy has hanged himself. I'm not very sure that's a reason to hang yourself, but hey, you don't know. He died there and was buried in the family's tomb. David soon arrived at Mahanaim. By now, Absalom had mobilized the entire army of Israel and was leading the troops across the Jordan River. Absalom had appointed Amasa as commander of his army, replacing Joab, who had been commander under David's army. Absalom and the Israelites' army set up camp in the land of Gilead. When David arrived at Mahanaim, he was warmly greeted by Shobi, son of Nahash, who came from Rabbah of the Ammonites, and Maki, son of Ammiel, from Lodeba, and by Barzillai of Gilead from Rogerim. They brought sleeping mats, cooking pots, serving bowls, wheat, barley, flour, roasted grains, beans, lentils, honey, butter, sheep, goats, and cheese for David and those who were with him. For they said, "You must all be very hungry and tired, thirsty after a long march throughout the wilderness." And that is basically the end of chapter 17. All right, let me just start saying this. Absalom had the smartest man in Israel on his side. This guy called Ahithophel was actually a really smart man. But David's prayer in 2 Samuel chapter 15 verse 1 was mightier and was greater than Ahithophel's intelligence. When David heard that Ahithophel who was once his advisor, had chosen to remain and become Absalom's advisor, David prayed and he said, "Oh Lord, I pray that you turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness." That was the prayer that David made when he heard that this guy had chosen to be at Absalom's camp. And in 2 Samuel chapter 16, verse 20, which was just the previous chapter that we had last read, God led Ahithophel to give foolish counsel that was listened to. When he told Absalom to sleep with 10 of David's concubines in public, that was Ahithophel's advice, which was horrible, terrible advice, but it was followed. And now in this chapter, we just read that God allowed Ahithophel to give great advice, yet it had not been accepted. It was rejected. So God was still in control, and the Lord had purposed. The Lord had purposed that advice ya Ahithophel haitafuatwa hata kama ni advice poor in this specific time, in this specific chapter and time that we are reading about it, is that the advice was actually great advice. But God was completely determined to answer David's prayer. There's so many lessons that we can learn from this chapter. First is that God is in control. Even when it doesn't make sense to us. It doesn't make sense as to why this guy is... but he was David's... he was trying to overthrow David. So, of course, God was not going to let that happen. So, there was no way God was going to let the good advice be taken. Be like, no, in your good advice, haitachukuliwa, wacha tupeane hii advice ingine mbaya that protects David. So, God is in control. Even when it looks like he's not, even when it looks like it doesn't make sense to us, God is still in control. Number 2 is that prayer moves the hand of God. Immediately, David heard about this guy, Ahithophel, and how he had chosen to remain at Absalom's palace. David was like, I pray that you, God, would turn his counsel into foolishness. And we see that actually happening. First, he gave this was the smartest man there was in Israel. And he was David's counselor at some point. or advisor at some point. And we see in chapter 16 that he gives a very foolish counsel when he tells Absalom to go and sleep with the 10 concubines in public. That was foolish counsel. So we actually see prayer, the prayer that David prayed, moving God's hand. And lastly, one of the things that I have learned is that God does not forsake us during the time of rebuke. I mean, David was going through the season of being rebuked by God. Everything that was happening to him right now, in this place where he's now living in the mountains, people are coming to help him with beans and lentil because now he's vagabond, he's just moving from one wilderness to another. All those were consequences of his own action. There were consequences of the things that he had done and the sins that he had committed. Yet God did not abandon him. God did not abandon him, even in this season. God is not usually out to destroy us. No, he's out to just correct us, to just rebuke us, and to just put us back in line. Because even in the seasons when we feel like, I'm suffering the consequences of my own sin, I'm probably being rebuked, I'm being corrected, I'm being chapered, I'm being disciplined, God does not abandon us, even in those times, because he's not out to destroy us. He's out to correct us. This is your girl, Wakeji Kamore, and this has been Reflections by Wakeji Kamore. See you tomorrow.